This is a summary of Dr. Oded Rechavi, Genes and the Inheritance of Memories Across Generations, where we break down the key insights, ideas, and takeaways from this content, giving you the gist so you can decide if you want the rest. Introduction. In this episode of the Hubermanlab podcast, Dr. Andrew Huberman interviews Dr. Oded Rechavi, a professor of neurobiology at Tel Aviv University. Dr. Rechavi's research challenges conventional genetics by exploring how experiences and acquired traits can be inherited across generations. While most people are familiar with genetic inheritance, the idea that we inherit fixed genes from our parents, Dr. Rechavi discusses the emerging evidence for epigenetic inheritance, where life experiences, stress, and environmental factors can modify gene expression and be passed down to offspring. This episode explores the mechanisms by which memories, stress responses, and learned behaviors may be encoded into genetic material and influence future generations, shedding light on a controversial yet fascinating new frontier in genetics. The discussion explores what DNA, RNA, and epigenetics are, and how they shape inheritance. The concept of acquired traits being passed down, how experiences could affect offspring beyond traditional genetics. The role of small RNAs in transgenerational inheritance, how RNA can store and transmit information across generations. How stress, starvation, and environmental challenges in parents may impact their children and grandchildren. The controversial history of Lamarckian evolution, why scientists once rejected the idea of inherited experiences and why that view is changing. The role of C. elegans nematode worms as a model organism, why these tiny creatures reveal so much about genetics. Memory inheritance and behavioral changes in offspring. Can learned knowledge be passed biologically? How epigenetic changes fade after multiple generations. Why some effects persist while others disappear. What is epigenetics? The science of inheriting experiences. Dr. Rechavi explains that epigenetics refers to changes in gene expression that do not alter the DNA sequence, but can still be inherited. Key mechanisms of epigenetics. DNA methylation. Chemical tags added to DNA that control gene activation. Histone modifications. Changes to proteins that package DNA, influencing gene expression. Small RNAs. Short RNA molecules that regulate genes and may store information from experiences. How is epigenetic information passed to offspring? The traditional view is that only DNA from sperm and eggs is inherited, while all other environmental effects, such as diet, stress, or learning, do not impact offspring. However, evidence suggests that certain traits such as stress resilience or metabolic adaptations can be passed down epigenetically. Small RNAs, in particular, are emerging as a key player in transgenerational inheritance. Key takeaway: genes are not the only thing we inherit. Our environment and experiences may also shape the biology of future generations. The history of inheritable traits. Why scientists rejected Lamarck's theory. The idea that acquired traits could be inherited dates back to Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, who proposed that organisms adapt to their environment and pass these adaptations to offspring. Why was Lamarck's theory rejected? Darwin's theory of natural selection, which states that evolution occurs through genetic variation and survival advantages, became dominant. August Weismann's barrier hypothesis, stating that only genetic material from sperm and eggs is inherited, was widely accepted. Failed scientific experiments. Some early studies claiming to prove inheritance of acquired traits turned out to be fraudulent, damaging the field's credibility. How did scientists rediscover epigenetics? Studies in worms, mice, and humans began showing that stress, starvation, and other life experiences affect offspring. Epigenetic modifications, such as small RNAs and DNA methylation, provided a mechanism for this inheritance. Some traits persist for multiple generations before fading, suggesting a biological memory that does not rely on changes in DNA sequence alone. Key takeaway: the idea that experiences can be inherited was once dismissed as pseudoscience, but modern research is challenging this assumption. Can memories be inherited? A look at small RNA transmission. One of Dr. Rechavi's most groundbreaking discoveries involves small RNAs, tiny molecules that help regulate gene expression. How small RNAs transmit information across generations. Small RNAs can store information about environmental conditions and pass it from parents to offspring. Experiments in C. elegans nematodes show that exposure to viruses or starvation triggers small RNA production, which can persist across multiple generations. These RNAs don't change the genetic code, but alter how genes are expressed in descendants. Key experiments in C. When worms are exposed to stress, their offspring inherit RNA molecules that make them more resilient to that same stress. Starving worms for a short period led to offspring that lived longer, suggesting that metabolic adaptations were inherited. Changes in small RNA expression typically persist for 3 to 5 generations before fading. Key takeaway: small RNAs provide a molecular mechanism for how experiences such as stress or starvation can be inherited across generations. Cold exposure, memory, and neural adaptation in worms. One of the most surprising discoveries in Rechavi's lab involves cold exposure and memory formation in worms. #TAC How cold affects memory in C. elegans. Worms normally forget learned information within 2 hours. However, if worms are placed on ice, they remember for much longer. This suggests that environmental conditions like temperature can modulate memory duration. Lithium and memory retention. Lithium, commonly used to treat bipolar disorder, was found to extend memory retention in worms. This effect was linked to specific neurons and molecular pathways involved in memory regulation. Key takeaway: environmental factors such as temperature can alter memory retention, suggesting a deeper link between external conditions and cognitive function. Can behavioral traits be passed to offspring? The role of mating preferences. Another fascinating finding from Rechavi's lab involves mate selection in worms. Key discovery: stress influences mating preferences. When worms experience stress, their offspring show a greater tendency to mate with males instead of self-fertilizing. This is driven by changes in pheromone production, which attract more males. Why does this happen? Self-fertilization maintains genetic stability but reduces genetic diversity. Mating with males introduces more genetic variation, potentially increasing resilience to environmental changes. Key takeaway: stress in parents can influence reproductive behavior in offspring, possibly as an adaptive strategy for survival. Final takeaways: the future of inheritable memories and epigenetics. The idea that experiences can be inherited was once dismissed, but is now gaining scientific credibility. Small RNAs play a key role in transgenerational inheritance, affecting stress responses, metabolism, and behavior. Certain traits can persist for multiple generations before fading, suggesting a temporary biological memory. Mating behaviors, stress resilience, and metabolic adaptations can all be influenced by parental experiences. Future research may lead to interventions that modify epigenetic inheritance to improve health outcomes. Dr. Rechavi's work challenges the traditional view of genetics, opening up exciting new possibilities for understanding how our experiences shape not just our own biology, but that of future generations. That's a wrap on Dr. Oded Rechavi, Genes and the Inheritance of Memories Across Generations. If you found this summary valuable, make sure to follow, subscribe, and come back for more in-depth breakdowns of content.